Tonight, Trigon stars in a college comedy film because the only thing he's looking to do is get laid. Mongul shows us his passionate love of gardening, and New 52 Lobo. That's the joke. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 106 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and we are still kicking it strong in the middle of Villains Month. Yes, we have to spend yet another entire episode reading through that gigantic omnibus because DC just can't collect things in a reasonable way. But regardless, we will get to that. Do need to do a little bit of housekeeping first. For people who are listening to the audio edition, this doesn't really concern you. But I'm going to tell it to you anyway because editing two separate versions is just too much work for me. So, YouTube people, hey, hi, how's it going? A while back, I posited to you the idea that we were going to put up edited versions of this show up on the Comics from the Multiverse channel. We're doing that. That's the thing that's going to be happening. I am going to be putting up edited versions, single comics, one at a time, up on the Comics from the Multiverse channel. However, there is a catch. Basically, they're not going to be going to the subscription feed. We are not going to be pushing those into the subscription feed. If you would like to see them, you can go to the Comics from the Multiverse channel and you will see all of them there. We will have playlists made so that you can just march your way through each and every comic as they come out. But yeah, we're not going to be pushing those into the feed usually. Maybe occasionally one will slip through. Can't guarantee it wouldn't, but for the most part, they're going to remain pretty separate. So if you're interested in that at all, be sure to check that out. But yeah, that's just something I thought I'd bring up because if I'm being honest with you, I really wanted them to be pushed to the subscription feed because then they wouldn't get less views. You know, I want them to get views. But I was vetoed on that one because I am still beholden to higher powers. Fight the power. So anyway, let me tell you about the comics that are coming out this week. This week, as I said before, I'm not going to give you the comic actual number and name. I'm just going to tell you the villain that we are covering. So we have Riddler, the Court of Owls, Mr. Freeze, Harley Quinn, Zod, Brainiac, Mongul, Black Manta, Solomon Grundy, Reverse Flash, Killer Frost, and Trigon. And oh wait, I skipped one. We've also got Lobo. And for anybody who knows anything about what happened to Lobo in the New 52, you better tune in to Lobo. So without spoiling anything more, let's go ahead and jump into it. I think we will begin with the Batman villains with Riddler. Batman 23.2, aka Riddler, written by Ray Fawkes and Scott Snyder, art by Jeremy Haun. So we pick up 4 years ago in Arkham Asylum. Riddler's playing some solitaire on his cell floor, and then a guard from behind says, whoa, Riddler, you're not allowed cards. Not someone like you. Nah, I'm going to take those, and you're sleeping without sheets. And he pushes him down to the ground. And so we cut to now, and we see Riddler is getting prepared. He's setting everything up. He's taking some decks of cards, putting them in his jacket pocket, and this entire time he's listing off just a bunch of riddles. And he says them all over the course of the issue, and they actually apply to the issue itself, so I'll say them when we get to there. But we see that he reaches Wayne Enterprises, and we see that basically he has made himself a little flash mob to show up and protest outside of Wayne Enterprises. And this is while the Forever Evil stuff is going on, but it turns out there was an SEC filing or something that is accusing the Wayne Enterprises of bribery and corruption and such like that. So he's faked this little thing of, all these people are freaking out over that. And we see as he walks in, he's planting like explosives on doors and stuff like that. And he says that Wayne Tech Security has some of the best security. It's got this computer system that like resets every 18 minutes and only cards that fit their algorithm will be able to get through. I managed to crack it in just a few days. And so he uses this card to get in and move past the security guards. And as he's making his way past the metal detectors, the crowd outside starts like rushing the, whatever they're called, the barricades, which distracts the guards at the metal detectors long enough for him to get his little Riddler cane past the metal detector. And he's like, oh, well, have fun, you guys. So he walks in, he puts on his iPod, because at that point it is an iPod, and he puts on his mask as he's playing his music. And he's like, yeah, you know, I take pleasure in the small things. So at this point, the head of security is looking over all the monitors, and he's like, this doesn't make any sense. Why would a bunch of people protest for an SEC filing? This isn't right. Double check security. What's going on? And he runs through all of the footage of the last 15 minutes, and he comes across Riddler on the footage, and he's like, son of a bitch, that's Riddler. Oh, God, we let Riddler in. Okay, everyone, lock down. We're on high alert. Riddler's in here. So he gets his gun, and he starts trying to track him down. And we see him get stopped by a guard, some other guard, and he's like, oh, Riddler, stop right there. I've got my gun. And Riddler throws out the first one, advancing every other moment in between reverse. Leave me to my own device, and I get direct and worse. And the guard still trains his gun. He's like, what? Just keep your hands up. He's like, oh, come on, try to figure out the riddle. And as he's doing so, he's putting his hand down in his pocket. The guard, apparently it's a taser instead of a gun. He fires off the taser, and it turns out that it's actually something to reverse the taser's electricity, because the answer to the riddle is electricity. And he's like, all right, it's you moron. You couldn't even get that right. So guard's knocked out. He makes his way through the desks of Wayne Tower and comes across someone's yogurt, which he just steals off the desk, which, if you ask me, is the most evil thing he's done all issue. And he looks down at the crowd, and he's like, oh, all these people think they have a voice, but they're just pennies in the big machine. They don't have anything to really say. So we see the head of security is making his way up the access. He's like, yeah, okay, everybody, what's going on? I need some, we need to be organized. Riddler wants this chaos, this disarray. And we see that he's basically blocking down communications. Nobody can get a clear message through. And he's like, all right, don't worry. I know where he's going. I've got a good idea. So we see him take out a little sticky bomb, put it in the yogurt container, and kick it at a cement wall. And as it explodes, on the other side is a group of executives who are meeting up. And he's like, hey, everyone, I'm here for Caroline Slater. She calls you all just mindless drones. Did anybody just point her out? That's her? Great, thanks. Come on, Carrie. And picks her up and reads off the next riddle. My servants cannot leave me in all they number 5. They bring me everything I want, and I keep them alive. And it turns out it is a hand, which he uses her hand to get past the biometric scanner. But as he does so, one of the women stands up and just punches Riddler in the face. I mean, like, I took 2 years of self-defense classes. You ain't got nothing on me. And at that point, Riddler's like, you don't touch me. None of you touch me. I'm freaking out now. And he smacks her upside the head with the cane and shocks her, just being like, you're stupid. You're a moron. You don't touch me. And so he walks away, and he's like, all right, lost my cool for a little bit there, but I'll get there. So he makes his way back to his old office that he had at Wayne Enterprises. See 0 year for that. And he's like, yeah, I may have lost my cool. I didn't always used to get so angry, but like, they touched me and I don't like that. So behind him, all of a sudden comes the voice of the head of security, who's like, hey, it's been a while. Do you recognize me? I'm the guard at Arkham that took away your pack of cards. The one we mentioned at the beginning? Yeah, that was me. And so he lists off his next riddle. He says, I'm sorry that I woke today because I've lost my right. I'll sit here in the corner now and mumble at my plight. And he's like, I'm not going to play your games, Riddler. You're a psycho. You're a loony. That's the whole reason you were in Arkham Asylum. And just because you're out now doesn't mean you're better. You just escaped. That's it. So regardless, I'm not going to let you do anything. And he goes and he body slams Riddler. We see Riddler do an uppercut on him, kick him in the balls, and just being like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and recite my riddle again. And he's like, yo, you just kicked me in the balls, but joke's on you. I was wearing a cup. I bet your foot hurts pretty hard right now. And he repeats the riddle one more time and then throws this dart at the guard, which on impacting with his arm just explodes it. The entire arm just falls off. And it turns out it's his right arm. And the answer to the riddle was, the guard himself. And he's like, yeah, no, I recognize you. I knew exactly where you were going to be. The whole reason I came here today was for you. I wanted my revenge on you taking my cards. The one thing that I enjoyed while I was in Arkham, and you took it away. And you dared to touch me with that very arm that I just blew off. So now you've lost it because you were an idiot. You're all just idiots. So he finally makes his way up to the roof. And I think I missed one of the things in here. There was a thing where there was the riddle was for a pack of cards. It was like, oh, I've only got one suit or something. But regardless, he gets up to the roof and he's like, all right, I could easily take over this tower now. In fact, I more or less have. Everything inside now belongs to me. But I'm not going to do anything about that because all of these people are too stupid to play my game. There's only one person that I want to be able to play my game, and that's Batman. And the Secret Society and the Crime Syndicate are saying that Batman is gone. They're saying he's dead. I doubt that. So I'm just going to sit here on the roof, play my solitaire, and wait for Batman to come back. And that's the issue, how he says he's just killing time until Batman returns. I got to be honest, I like it. I really do. I know that it is infamously hard to write for Riddler because you need to be as smart as the people you are writing. So I like this idea of, yeah, no, he's got this plan. He had these riddles. He's walking through it, but he's not infallible. He doesn't see every outcome specifically and plans for it. He just plans for the general things that could slow him down. So yeah, he got punched in the face here. But he dealt with it, and he continued on with his plan. I like that level of intelligence here. It does bring Riddler down a bit, but it makes him a bit more doable, because if there's one thing that's kind of hard to deal with, it's the level of omnipotence that Riddler seemingly has in a lot of stories, where he's planned for every outcome. I like where he's at here. And in terms of him just sitting waiting for Batman, yeah, I like that too. I like the idea that many of Batman's foes are essentially just like, no, I'm in this for the fun of it. And Batman's the only one who makes it fun. Joker's got that. Riddler's got that. I would argue Bane has that as well. Yeah, no, I like that aspect to it. So overall, I'm going to give this one, I'm going to give it an 8. I think it's good. I think it's solid. It doesn't feel like it's really building to anything as much as it is just like, if you're wondering why Riddler doesn't pop up elsewhere during this, it's because we can't really spoil Zero Year, but here's at least telling you why he can't show up anywhere else. So yeah, it's a solid 8. Batman and Robin 23.2, aka The Court of Owls, written by James Tynion IV, art by Jorge Lucas. So this is kind of a, what are they doing now? And then here's a bunch of their origin stuff. We pick up in Gotham City, 1974. And there's this guy who's running into his house just freaking out. And we get this narration that basically says like, ah, yes, child, let me tell you the history of like what happens when people mess with the Court of Owls. So we see this guy running into his house and his wife's freaking out. It's like, Roger, what's going on? It's just be like, oh man, you don't even understand. We got to leave the city. I'm not safe. And he's like, what are you talking about? You're literally the head of the police. How are we not safe? And he's like, I started an investigation into him and I shouldn't have done that. Oh, we got to go now. And he starts packing up his stuff. And then his kid comes up saying like, Daddy, I learned a poem in school. He's like, not now, son. I'm very busy. He's like, okay, well, I'll just tell it to you anyway. And then he says the whole thing of like, beware the Court of Owls that watches all the time, blah, blah, blah. And Roger's like, where'd you learn that poem, kid? Where'd you learn it? He's like, oh, he taught me. And then he looks up and then, oops, there's a Talon. And the Talon goes ahead and kills them. So cut to present day. We're in the middle of the Justice League is dead. This world is ours. All that stuff from Forever Evil. And we see a member of the Court of Owls talking to this tiny little child being like, so yeah, we are basically symbiotic with Gotham. It can't exist without us, and we require it to survive. And the kid's like, okay, well, all those people are down there looting and breaking and burning Gotham. It's like, right. And we need to stop that. So me and you are going to go on a little field trip, okay? And it's like, okay, well, so be it. So then we flash back to 1914. We're at the Orchard Hotel. And we see that the mayor is basically being walked through their loot room that is in there. And it's filled with gold and all these pieces and trinkets and stuff like that. And just Court of Owls guy is like, "Ah, yes, yes, we have all this stuff here, Mayor, but we don't let the common people see." And he's like, "Oh, are you calling me a commoner?" And he's like, "No, no, I wouldn't dream of it, Mayor. But, you were born in the Narrows and you ran on the populist ticket." And he's just like, "Ah, yes, and I believe in those stances as well, though. I do stand for something." He's like, "Right, no, we get it. Here's the thing. You are inviting the 5 national unions into Gotham tomorrow. We need you to basically listen to what they have to say and then tell them that's outrageous and kick them out of Gotham, never to return." It's like, "Why would I? I'm the one who invited them." And it's like, "Yeah, but we can't let you have unions in Gotham. That's too much. It messes with our bottom line, if you understand." And he's just like, "What? Who do you think you are?" And then at that point, he gets surrounded by like, "Who? Who? Who, you ask?" Get it? I'm doing an owl pun. So they step up to this mayor, freak him out, and then we see, he stands up to the union, says, "You'll never have a place in Gotham." And then he returns to the Court of Owls, and he's like, "I've done what you wanted. Please, why are you doing this?" And we see that they've put him down inside of their labyrinth to be hunted by their Talon because, he served his purpose. No use for him anymore. So we see the man and the daughter going to a freight elevator. They make their way down the building, and it's like, "This is where we all began. This is where the Court of Owls started." And the little girl's like, "This building doesn't look that old." And it's like, "No, it's changed over the years, just like we have. We've remained the same down in the foundations, but up top, we've changed our appearance numerous times. The true essence of power." So then we go to 1891 at a train station. There's this man who's a photographer talking to his woman, Mary, and he's just like, "Oh, I don't like it, Hav. You're heading off and you've let these people know that you've got this picture of the Court of Owls meeting and you're going to sell it off in Philadelphia." And it's like, "Oh, don't worry, Mary." Yes, they do speak with the same voice. "Don't worry, Mary. I'm going to be fine. You don't have nothing to worry about. I'll get you out of here just as soon as I sell off this picture. Then we'll be living the high life and I'll expose the Court of Owls for what they are." So he kisses his girl goodbye, hops on this train, and as he's hopping on the train, a noose descends through the roof of the train, hangs him up, and then we see the woman is, I guess, chloroformed and is subsequently killed. And we see a article in the Gotham Gazette saying photographer kills his wife and hangs self in the Metropolitan Terminal. So then we follow the man and the girl down some dark sewer-like tunnels, and the girl's like, "Oh, I'm still quite afraid. Is it allowed to be afraid?" And it's just like, "Ah, yes, it's perfect to feel fear because strength often comes through fear of what we don't understand." So then we cut to Gotham, the Narrows, 1862, and we get exposed to Felix Harmon, a.k.a. the Gotham Butcher, as we've seen numerous times in the book Talon, who's just gone on a massive killing spree. He's killed like 30 people here, all just tonight. And the Court of Owls guy's like, "Dude, you're our Talon. You're supposed to kill in secret. You are getting picked up by papers that are calling you the Gotham Butcher. Like, what the hell you doing, man?" And he's like, "You promised me I'd be killing people a lot, and frankly, I don't think that you told me enough people to kill. So I'm going to take this into my own hands, and I will change the game. I'll change how this is played." And as we cut back to present day, the guy's explaining to the daughter of like, "Yeah, we had to kind of go underground for like a decade after him because he brought a bit too much attention. But regardless, we came back and we came back stronger than ever." And he's like, "Oh, we always win in these stories, don't we, Papa?" I was like, "Yes, of course we do. We're the Court of Owls. We're always there. We're always in Gotham. We always succeed. And sometimes the only way that anybody's ever going to beat us, truly, is if they tear Gotham to the ground, because we are at one, as I said, with Gotham." So anyway, they arrive down here, down at the birthplace of the Court of Owls. And he says, "Things in Gotham are pretty dire. Like, we might actually have the city torn to the ground, so we need to bring out our big guns." And we see this big iron door, and he's like, "This is the one who started it all." And then this woman nearby, she's got a crossbow. She comes out and she's like, "No, no, no. I have already killed several people from our group that have come down here trying to free him. If we free him, it will be the death of us all. So no, I will not let you do this, and I will kill you to stop you." And then we see the young girl pops out of nowhere, knife in hand, stabs this woman to death. And she's like, "The woman didn't understand, did she, Papa?" And it's like, "No, she did not. See, the only way that we're going to be able to save Gotham, to save our place in it, is if we let him out. The first Talon." So yeah, we're gonna get the first Talon. Apparently it's gonna happen in the book Talon. So sure, I'm okay with that. I liked the idea of the Court of Owls. I think everyone did. I think the idea of this secretive society in Gotham that's been running things behind Batman's back, I think everyone was pretty much on a board with that. And then throughout the book, Talon, which again, I don't dislike, I think it's a good enough book, they've been introducing more and more of these little lore facets to the Court of Owls, and I've been okay with all of them. This thing of the first Talon, like, I don't know. I feel like it's just going a bridge too far, especially with the way they describe the lore of like, oh, we've saved the corpses of all of our Talons, and only recently have we gotten the technology to bring them back to life after death. This doesn't, like, he'd be a skeleton. You'd literally just have a skeleton, right? Like, I can't figure any way out around that. So, I don't know. It just seems like a bridge too far for me. I do like what this particular issue does, though, of walking us through the ages and saying, like, no, here's, like, different things they did in different times. Like, 1914s, they fought against the Unions. That makes sense. That's solid, and I'm sure that's nothing that would ever come back in American history. So, overall, I gotta say, this is probably a solid, like, 7. It would have been higher if I think this last reveal would have been better. It just, I don't know, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, here's the MacGuffin, and I guess we'll deal with it eventually. It just doesn't come off as something that feels really powerful in its own right. But overall, it's still an interesting issue, so I think a 7's fair for it. Batman the Dark Knight 23.2, aka Mr. Freeze, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Jason Masters. So, a lot of this is kind of just a recap of Batman Annual number 1, I believe, but there is some new elements to it. So, over 30 years ago, we're in Gotham City, and we see that Victor Freeze's dad is walking out on his family without a word, just leaving. The mom's crying, telling him to come back, but he just leaves. And we see the mother come up and try to comfort Victor, and it's just like, hey, maybe we should go live with Grandma out in Nebraska. That sound good? And just be like, yeah, okay, I guess. Is Dad coming home? He's like, no, that's why we're going to Nebraska. But don't worry, I'm going to be with you forever. And then we see they went out onto a lake. The mother fell through the ice, and Victor tried to save her, but ultimately she survived, but was essentially brain dead. She was no longer responsive or able to be there for Victor as she promised. So we then cut to present day where Victor is in some suburban household completely filled with snow, and he's just explaining this. He's like, yes, here's the thing. A lot of people think, including Batman, but he's wrong, they think that my whole thing with Nora, the girl that I said was my wife, that in this current continuity is not my wife, had to do with an Oedipus complex with my mother. It is not an Oedipus complex. I want to make that clear. I did not have sexual relations with my mother. However, I did have a thing where, I don't have any, like, physical touch with people anymore. And, maybe I just kind of, like, have a thing with that. So, at that point, he makes this thing saying, like, yes, life is a mosaic full of surfaces. Some are reflective, but, like, only when you step back and take it all in can you get the full shape of things. So we then get out in Arkham Asylum. He gets a newspaper clipping, he doesn't know from who, of basically someone named Freeze, who looks just like his father. And he's like, that's my dad. My dad went and in Gotham started a new family. He didn't even leave the city. He just started a new family here. And he's just thinking on this, and he's talking to his therapist. And his therapist is like, well, are you angry about this? And be like, why would I be angry? He abandoned us. He started another family. Why would I be angry at him? I have no ill will towards him. However, I do now have extra family members, and those are people I want to meet. And he's like, right, but I don't think that's a good idea. See, you have what we call obsessive love disorder, Victor. You latch on in unhealthy ways to these family members. And he's like, I've read my paperwork, doctor. That's not even a theory. Like, you just pulled that out of your ass. And also, I have seen the big rubber stamp on my file that says uncurable. So I know you're only here just to placate me. And he's like, right. Okay, well, how about this? I'm going to get you a crown, and I'm going to get you to write a letter to these new families, and I promise you, I will get the letters to your family members. Okay? And if they want to see you, that'll be with them. He's like, all right, well, if you're lying to me, I'm going to kill you. So the whole thing of, crime syndicate, forever evil happens. He manages to escape. And as he does so, he busts into the doctor's office and he's like, oh, hey, I was wondering if you were still here. Do you still have my letters? And he looks at the doctor's desk, finds them, and he's like, can't be a man against my word, doctor. And so he just straight up kills the doctor, shoves the letters in his throat. So we see him boarding a boat, which, frankly, I don't know where it's going to or where it's coming from. But regardless, there's a nurse on board from Arkham who was always good to him. And this nurse is being attacked by some cannibals that also broke out of Arkham. And they start trying to attack her. And then Mr. Freeze steps up, grabs one of them, freezes his head, and crushes in his hand, saying, hey, this nurse is under my protection. Consider your next move carefully. And so the cannibals, of course, start attacking him. He just continues to freeze their heads and smash to them. And he's like, well, Nurse Wilmot, I've saved your life. When we board, I think I'm going to need your help with some things. So as they board, basically, she just manages to track down the information on where the family now lives. And we see Victor in modern day explaining all this, setting up the table, getting all the dishes in place. And he's like, oh, right. How fair. I should have told you about my condition. Also, in the interstitial, the father actually died. His father is dead, but he's like, well, no matter. Like, yes, I'm so sad he died. I would have liked to have met him again. But regardless, I now have you still, my new family. So he explains his condition, and it's everything that we saw, where Nora's not actually his wife. It's just some random girl he grew an attachment to. Bruce Wayne says, hey, no using Wayne Tech money for that. He throws a chair at some chemicals, and it causes him to become Mr. Freeze. And he's like, yeah. I focused my anger on Wayne, but I know that that's not the person who did it. Instead, I focus it now on Batman, because Batman shattered the illusion of me loving this woman. And that's he broke apart my life. How dare he do such a thing? And we see him still talking to his family. He's like, all right, I'm getting off track. I need to go down and prepare dinner. And he goes down into the basement. He goes down into the basement where we see a bunch of body parts all in bags. Very clearly his father. And he sees the newspaper on top of the body parts with his father's face cut off. And so as he's giving grace for all the food, he holds up a glass and he's like, it's so good to be part of a loving family again. And I swear to you, I will never let anyone take you away from me ever again. Not Bruce Wayne, not Batman, nobody. I will be the father that you guys deserve. And as we zoom out to the rest of the family, they are frozen absolutely solid, killed by Mr. Freeze. During the annual, I said I wasn't a huge fan of this new updated style of origin, specifically the part where Nora is not his wife. I still think that. I still think that Nora should be his wife. But I must give credit here that I do like that they said, okay, you guys didn't like the fact that we gave him an unhealthy obsession with somebody that had no attachment to him. Now what we're doing is we're introducing this essentially step family, and he's introduced himself as the patriarch. So we're moving out of the scorned lover and now the family who is he'll do anything for sort of role. And I'm more okay with that. I like the fact that they put it back to, okay, this is a family bond to some extent, but I'm less okay with the fact that he killed his own father. At least that's what's implied. Or at the very least, he cut up his father into tiny little pieces, which is still just as messed up. So there's a lot to unpack here. I can't say I really particularly enjoyed it. It was a fine issue, but I just, in the back of my head, I still had that annual the whole time, and how this automatically feels like it's trying to fix that. It's trying to adjust the way that was done. So I'm going to give this I'll give it a 6.5. It does have its merits. I do want to point out that if this were like any other character but being told in the same way, I probably would give this a good 7.5, but I am still just wrestling with that. This is New 52 continuity Mr. Freeze, and I'm just not on board with that as a core concept. So 6.5 is as high as I'm going to give it. Detective Comics number 23.2, aka Harley Quinn, written by Matt Kindt, art by Neil Googe. So we open up with Harley just chilling outside of the group as the crime syndicate gives their whole spiel. And he's like, yeah, I'm out of Suicide Squad, and they're giving their whole thing, but they say they're going to cause chaos. But here's the thing. Anybody who really enjoys chaos only enjoys their own brand of chaos, if that makes sense. So she then decides, you know what, drive all night, I'm going to make my way into Gotham instead, cause some chaos here. No squad, I'm in charge of my own life. And we get some flashbacks. Basically, here's her origin story. She grew up in a very broken home. Looks like one older brother, two younger brothers. And she was just studying her ass off. She's reading books constantly as her family's shouting all around her. And her father even taunts her saying, you think you're going to be able to get out of here? Nah, you're trapped here forever like the rest of us. But she does manage to study enough that she gets out. She becomes a psychologist and she makes her way out. So we see she deals with some people that clearly have some mental issues. Someone complains about their fingers and how she has nightmares about fingers. Another one says how afraid she is of the word cat. So she's like, yeah, no, this is all fine and good, but they are just your average run-of-the-mill anxiety stuff. I want the real crazies. I want something more extreme. So she makes her way to Arkham, gets a job there, and she starts dealing with Two-Face, Riddler, stuff like that. And she's like, no, I am so damn smart. I'm going to be the one that gets through to them. Until finally she comes across the Riddler and she's like, oh, or it's the Riddler, the Joker. He's like, oh, I can do something here, but I have to be able to get past the wall, this barrier between us. Talking literally about the glass separating them, but metaphorically, she doesn't know what it's like to be an Arkham inmate. So she dyes her hair some crazy colors. She throws on some makeup and she hides her identity. And she makes her way inside of the Arkham yard. And as she makes her way up to the Joker turns around, grimaces at her, and then plants a huge kiss on her and just be like, oh my. So she's immediately smitten. Her superior's like, Dr. Quinzel, you're straight up fired. Are you kidding me? You can't do that. You can't just pretend to be an inmate. What the hell are you thinking? And so we see that there was an outbreak. All the villains escaped. Joker took Harley to Ace Chemical, dropped her in the vat, and basically turned her into the Harley we know. And she says, oh, yes, I'm finally free to forget my past, free to become something new, to play crazy. And she enjoys that freedom of not having to live up to these expectations, not having to play by the rules of society. So we see her with Joker at this point, but she stumbles out alone after Ace Chemical, and she's still dressed in Arkham inmate gear, and she sees a bunch of cheerleaders walking by, and she bludgeons the crap out of them and steals their socks. Then she sees a runner go by wearing some short shorts, bludgeons her and steals her shorts. And then she goes near a pawn shop, sees a woman wearing a black and red corset, looks in the pawn shop window, sees a giant mallet, and she's like, that seems nice. Steals the mallet, beats the crap out of the woman, steals the corset, and now we have the Harley Quinn outfit. So she decides, you know what? Yep, I've got my plan. I'm going to go ahead and start living, treating life like a all-you-can-eat buffet. And so she, 3 days ago, calls up someone, Lord only knows who, and places an order at Ace Novelties for this plan that she's got. She's like, oh, I've paid your bill and given you 10% interest. I need you to really deliver here. Make sure you follow my specifications immediately. So then after 3 days, they fill the invoice, and it turns out it's a bunch of game consoles, and immediately they're just throwing them out to the kids. She's dressed as a cop, mind you, in disguise. She's throwing them out to the kids, saying oh, yep, everyone get one. All of them, everyone make sure to take enough for your family. And once everybody has one, we see she makes her way into the police precinct, wearing Bob's outfit, apparently, and one of the cops is like, hey, wait a minute, you're not Bob. And it's like, no, I'm not. Bob's out in the car. He's naked and surrounded by dynamite. Here's one for you, too. And she lights a stick of dynamite, walks out of the building, tosses it behind her, and then the police precinct and the bomb and the cop car both explode. And she's like, well, that's your average run-of-the-mill chaos. Sounds good to me. And then at that point, she kind of dissociates. She sees the pain that she's causing, but she's like trying not to actually deal with it. Like she's numb to it. So she just looks at it and she's like, all right. And then we can see this argument going on in her head between Harleen and Harley. So that's its own thing. And then after 3 days pass, she calls up the person who made the game consoles and she says, hey, I need you to push that software update now. And she's like, all right, sure. And he starts downloading the update, pushes it to all the game consoles. And then as the update completes, all across Gotham, these kids playing these game consoles, they all start exploding. Not like their heads explode, like the consoles themselves are bombs, and they all explode and they kill these children. And Harley just looks on from above saying, not really doing anything for me. So at that point, Deadshot shows up and he's like, hey, Harley, yes, we're out of the Suicide Squad. However, we're both aimless without it. We're like bullets. We need to be directed. What do you say? We find ourselves something to do. And she says, yeah, well, if I'm a bullet, go ahead and shoot me. And it says to be continued in Suicide Squad 24, which is a tie-in of Forever Evil. Okay. Here's the thing. I am from the future. I am from 10 years after this comic was published. I know Harley becomes an anti-hero. I know that she gets a series in like a couple of months that's just like her doing things and not being like a villain. She just committed a huge act of terrorism. And I don't think that we can brush that under the rug. Like, don't get me wrong here. Like, the other one that we're meant to reference this with is Deadshot, because Deadshot did a Suicide Squad thing in the last week's issues, and he was doing it for money. But he always made sure he had a moral code to it. She just killed at least like 1,000 kids. And now it's like, oh yeah, tee-hee, that's just her brand of chaos. Like, no. I can't square that circle, DC. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're keeping her as villain, this is a villainous thing to do. 100%. I am all for Harley Quinn being this horrific murderer that's following in the Joker's footsteps. But you can't just have her kill 1,000 kids and then go, I didn't really like that. That wasn't for me. Like, no, too bad, man. Maybe that's just me. But like this seems like irredeemable to Harley at this point. Like when she was under the thrall of the Joker, so be it. But this is, in all technically, she has left the Joker. That is no longer what she's doing. She is making her own decisions at this point, and her first decision is, I'm going to kill a bunch of children. So I don't see, Harley Quinn is now just a hard villain, and that's going to take a lot to get past. As term for a rating, I mean, it's not poorly written. It's just intent. It's where I know things are going to end up. So at this point, she is still just a hardcore villain, and this does a lot to further that. So if I'm looking at this from a technical standpoint, it is like a good, I'd say 6.5 to 7. I'd go with the 6.5 though, just because it is hard for me to divorce that. It is hard for me to say, no, she is actually good at heart. So yeah, 6.5 for this. But like, how do you go from here? Action Comics 23.2, aka Zod, written by Greg Pak, art by Ken Lashley. So, we've never actually met Zod in Action Comics, I don't think. He's a totally new character, so we don't have to deal with, here's how he fits in the story. Instead, we pick up way back in the past, and we have Zod as a kid, and he's looking over essentially a little fishbowl full of monsters, and he's like, my name's Zod, I really like monsters. And his dad picks one up and is like, all right, this one's ripe, we're going to dissect it. And Zod doesn't want it to, he sees it as a pet, but Daddy Zod's like, hey, kid, we're scientists. We can't get sentimental, okay? See, this monster is like a young little youth version of the monsters that are on this island that is on Krypton, because eventually people are going to want to expand and live on this island, and we need to find a way to kill all the monsters that are on this island. I know I don't have to explain this to you. I'm explaining it to the audience. And so he's like, yeah, okay, all right, I guess, no tears. But as they're about to dissect this monster, it seems that another monster, possibly the mother, starts attacking their little science bay pod, and they have to run away and flee out into the wilderness, which is, might I remind you, full of monsters. So they start running their way out, and we have Zod saying, like, I don't think my parents ever hugged me, but, like, as they were getting me out of there, they held me tighter than I've ever been held before. And they make their way out, and it's like, yeah, there's no escape for them. So then we cut to 1 year later, and we see Jor-El and Zor-El on a ship, and they're both arriving on this island. And turns out this is like Jor-El's science trip or something like that, but it got turned into a rescue mission because they picked up on a beacon requesting help. So they arrive on this island, and they see a skull there, which then a monster immediately leaps out at them, but then is shot with 2 sticks in the neck, killing it. And we see that it is Zod, and Zod has gone full Green Arrow. Like, he has a bow, and he's, like, living off the land and whatnot. And they're like, hey, you must be Zod. We came to save you. And he's like, oh, great, my heroes. So, flash forward 15 years later. He's fighting off a whole bunch of lizard people, and he's like, oh, by command of Zod, no fear, soldiers. We will defeat these people. And as he's fighting them, turns out it's all just a danger room exercise. It's all a hologram. And he gets prematurely canceled in it because there's some, like, grand gala he has to go to or something. And they're like, oh, hey, there's looks like those insects are really going to be a problem. He's like, actually, they're called the Char, and they're lizard people. And everyone laughs, and he says, they've always laughed at me because I was like the Jungle Boy that was brought back and rescued. I'm a fun little story that they don't take seriously, but oh, they'll take me seriously. So we see at the gala, it's at the House of El. He's rubbing elbows with Jor-El, and Jor-El's like, oh yeah, you know, I'm built for the lab, not the battlefield. I wouldn't fit in there with you. And he's like, I don't know, give it a shot, man. And Zor-El comes up and basically says, hey, here's the thing. I need to talk to you. We finally sterilized the island that your parents died on. We didn't find anything, but we did manage to capture one monster that was left over, and it was the same type of monster that they were going to dissect that day, and it's being kept here in like a stasis sort of thing. And Zod sees it, and he's like super pissed off. So some time passes, a few years later, and we see that Zod has gotten a couple of followers, Feora, for instance, and he goes into this room where all of these war things are kept, and they're just collecting dust because they're not a war society anymore. They're all about science and whatnot. But as they walk in there and pick up some weapons or whatnot, all of a sudden it is under attack, and the guard is trying to fight back, not very well, and we see that the thing that is attacking is the Char, these lizard people who he's trained for against. And he's like, it's the Char, they're finally launching their attack. We will prevail. And so they launch into action, they fight against this monster, and they manage to cut off its head. And Zod presents it to the people saying, like, this was just the first one. We need to go and we need to take them out now. Who's with me? We will train you and make you soldiers again. And everyone's all very militaristic and patriotic. And so we see Archon, the home of the Char. They're just chilling one day. They see some planes overhead, and they're like, look, it's birds. And it's like, wait a minute, those ain't birds. Them are drones. And then all of a sudden, everyone is attacked on the planet. So everyone is like, yes, let's celebrate our victory over the Char. We have taken them out before they could get to us. But Jor-El did some digging, and he brings Zod to his lab, and he's like, hey, Zod, here's the deal. Boom, punches him in the face. And Zod's like, excuse me? I am the general. You just committed treason. He's like, excuse me? You're the one who committed treason, Zod. And it turns out that Jor-El, he investigated the genome of the monster that attacked the Kryptonian planet, and it was actually just a genetic experiment that was made on planet by Zod in order to fuel a war with this other planet. And this definitely has nothing to do with the war in Iraq. I want to make that clear to you. This has nothing to do with the war in Iraq. So they basically say, oh yes, by order of the council, you will be sent to the Phantom Zone. What do you say? Like, what are your final words? And he says, I promise you this, no matter where I go, no matter who I am, I will always be your monster. And they send him away into the Phantom Zone. And then we get one more flashback to him running with his parents away from the monsters. His mother gets captured, and he's like, no, Mom, what are we supposed to do, Dad? And he's just like, we have to leave her. Her being eaten is the only chance we'll have to survive. I'm so sorry, son. And he's like, I'm sorry too, Dad. And he takes a stick and jabs it in his father's eye so that he's able to survive and run away even further. And we get one final page of Zod and several other people in the Phantom Zone watching a image of Superman saying, yes, I this is what has become of Krypton. I will go out and I will show that he needs me again. So, end. I think it was good. I think that it did a good job of, not only does it set up this idea of, Zod is this militaristic person, but I never liked the idea that Zod was immediately present for the downfall of Krypton. I think that it's better that he be sent away far beforehand and Krypton has nothing to do with him. I think this was a fine enough thing of saying Zod is overly militaristic to the point of he's picking fights, and that's why he's a villain. It's a good enough job there. I will say at no point in here was there a kneel. That's disappointing, but can't win them all. So I'm going to give this one, I'll give this 7.5. I think it was good. I think it was a nice solid introduction to Zod as the New 52 version. I do think that having him kill his father might have been just a little bit of overkill, but if you want him to live in the jungle for a year and be self-sufficient and whatnot, okay, sure, I guess, have your way, but 7.5 for it. Superman 23.2, aka Brainiac, written by Tony Bedard, art by Pascal Alixe. So, we open up with like 3 different people. By the way, before I even start this, you need to have read like all of Action Comics written by Grant Morrison. It's like required reading. But regardless, we open up with like 3 different people who are all clearly being led by Brainiac. And we see them across multiple different years saying like, yes, I am the voice of the colony of the Collector of Worlds. And the last one we see is on planet Noma, and it says today. And that's the one we deal with. We have a woman who, she has a name, but we don't know it now. And basically this is like a weird sort of steampunk planet called Noma. And this robot worked for this woman. His name is Numanoid. And the woman's like, what are you doing? I programmed you. What are you doing? It's like, I'm the voice of the Collector now. And here's the thing. We are here to save your city. We're here to save it. Our planet's database has been copied into the thing to make sure that it is preserved in the extinction event. And significant artifacts will also be preserved. And her name is Victoria Viceroy, by the way. And basically says, what do you mean? What's going on? And he's like, let me give you the full breakdown here. And he's like, okay, so way back there was a planet called Yod Kolu, and on it there was a man named Vril Dox, and we see him performing this experiment, whatever it is, and saying like, yep, so his wife comes in super pissed off because he's not answering the comms. He's very much cut and dry. He's not very emotional. And as the wife comes in being like, by the way, have you seen our son? And then the chair that he's doing experiments on spins around. Turns out he's experimenting on his son. And immediately the wife's like, what in the hell is wrong with you, Vril? And he's like, I know this looks bad, but you have to understand it's for a greater purpose. And he's like, I don't care about your this is our son. What's the matter with you? So she takes the son and then basically reports him to the police. And he's put in front of a high council and is like, okay, let me explain to you what I found. There is the 5th dimension, and in this 5th dimension they are fighting, and because they are fighting, it's affecting us down here in our dimension. And because of that, there's this thing called the multitude, and it is basically going through planet to planet, destroying everything. And I have figured out the pattern to how they attack, and the next planet in line to be attacked is us. So I've already mastered this technology of miniaturization, and I've mastered this technology of bottling things. So Just trust me on this. Oh, and force fields. That was his other thing. And everyone's like, okay, yeah, no, solid, got it. You're insane, and we're going to exile you. So they do. They put him on a ship. But turns out he is Computo on board, and he's able to have Computo free him from his shackles and makes his way into the surgery bay of the exile ship. So some time passes, and the kid's like, oh, where's Daddy gone? And he's like, oh, somewhere he won't help you or hurt you, sweetie. And then all of a sudden on all the screens in Yod Kolu, Brainiac pops up, still going by Roldox. And he's like, hey, I know you exiled me, but I'm willing to turn a blind eye, and I want to help you. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to shrink this city that most people are in on Yod Kolu, and I am going to bottle it and preserve it so that the multitude can't kill you. You're welcome. And at that point, the wife's crying out, like, if you can hear me, if you've ever loved me at all, you won't do this. And he's like, okay, I'm going to do it. So he presses the button, he shrinks the city. And, the rest of the planet, like, starts freaking out, like, oh my God, how could he? But then, like, 5 minutes later, the multitude shows up and just wipes the planet clean anyway. So then he's like, okay, I saved my planet. I did that. So I'm going to go ahead and save all the planets on the list. I'm going to outrun the multitude and take one city, and I'm going to preserve it. That is my plan. But in order to be more efficient about it, I'm going to spread my voice amongst these multiple different creatures. So in Action Comics, we saw the Brainworm character. That was just something that he possessed. It wasn't actually Brainiac himself. But then we see Brainworm goes and deals with Krypton. He goes and steals a city from Krypton, and for a while there, he integrates himself to understand the important artifacts and stuff of the city, and he gets enamored with Jor-El. He's like, this guy is pretty dang smart, and I like him. Regardless, he's not in the city I need to take. I need to take Kandor. So he bottles up Kandor, he takes it away, and then he leaves as the multitude arrives. But as we know from Action Comics, Jor-El managed to repel the multitude. It didn't kill Krypton. So Brainiac, Vildox, hears that, and he's like, what? You can fight him back? And he immediately rushes back to Krypton. But in the intermediate, turns out Krypton exploded for unrelated reasons. And he's like, oh my God, Jor-El figured out how to fight him back, and now I'll never know that. So he decided on all future planets, as he goes to attack them, bottle them. He's going to attack them and make it so, like, okay, let me see what their idea is to repel something like the multitude, and then I'll try it on the multitude and see if that stops them. Smart thinking, me. So he's launched this attack on Noma. Victoria Viceroy breaks out, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm not sure if I believe you because, you might be lying, but regardless, I doubt that Brainiac is working solely on altruism. You can talk to him. Why don't you ask him the real reason he's doing this? And then Brainiac just shows up next to Victoria, and she tries to fire him. And it's like, you can ask me yourself, but I have force field technology, so you can't fight me. So he picks her up by the neck and basically says, like, no, I'm not doing this out of some weird, twisted urge. I'm not murdering just because I like it. I'm doing it to save these people. That is why I'm doing it. And he turns to the thing that he possessed, the robot, which he has since let free. And he's like, robot, you saw inside my mind. Do I do this out of wanting to murder? And the robot's like, no. And he's just like, there, see, the robot told you the truth. Anyway, goodbye. And he throws the woman aside and starts the bottling process. But Victoria apparently had a camera running on all this the whole time. And she's like, hey, computer, did you record everything he said about, like, bottling cities and stuff like that and killing all the rest of the planets? That was the other thing, is that he's killing the planets before the multitude can get to them just because screw you, multitude. And the camera's like, yes, no, we caught it. And he's like, great. Broadcast that to everything that is more than 1 light year away. I don't want him to even know that we're sending it out. Keep it secret until it's past that bubble. But then let all those other planets know so that they can prepare for him. And so Noma gets destroyed after the broadcast is sent out. Computo asks Brainiac, oh, do you want me to go to a new planet? He's like, hold on. I'm relishing this. And we see back on planet Earth, we have Dr. Shea Veritas at the center of the Earth, who receives the signal, decodes it, and it says, yes, I will claim my trophies and kill the planet itself. And Shea Veritas is like, this looks like a job for Superman. So that'll get wrapped up, I believe, I think that's Superman? Maybe it's Action Comics. I don't know. It's whatever one is dealing with the 20 or whatever right now. I like Brainiac. I think he is a very smartly done villain in that he represents, to some extent, the comic reader, the one who collects these comics. Like, that was how he was represented in Action Comics. He's someone who wants to see all this stuff preserved and not, like, messed with it all. He's all in favor of the status quo, whereas Superman would represent the idea of no, things need to change and things need to get different in comic universes for anything cool to happen. I like him as an idea. I don't like the fact that all of this is kind of built upon this idea of the multitude, because that felt like kind of a throwaway thing from Grant Morrison's run, and to now have it intrinsically linked with Brainiac's origin, where it could have just been a separate thing entirely, especially now that I know that they appear all throughout time, so it's not even a thing of they are gone forever per se, but the multitude was dealt with. Like, that was the final villain in Action Comics. It shouldn't be a problem anymore. So why is Brainiac still doing this is the question. And maybe you could explore that, but to tie it in intrinsically to his origin kind of just cheapens it a little, if that makes any sense. So overall, I'm going to say this is probably just a flat 7. I also don't like the fact that he was experimenting on a son to begin with, not because I think that that's like too dark or anything, but it just, again, it feels like it's, oh, he's so evil, he doesn't even know he's that evil. I don't know, it just feels cheap to me. But yeah, this is pretty much just a flat 7. I don't think it goes above that in any meaningful capacity. It's not a bad book, but it's also not good either. So yeah, 7. Green Lantern 23.2, aka Mongul, written by Jim Starlin, art by Howard Porter. So it really is just kind of an origin story and like a rundown of what he do. So we open up outside of the space of some federation called the Oblivion Federation, and the War World, which doesn't get revealed until later, is out there, and it's surrounded by a bunch of ships saying, hey, we sense that you've got some big weapons. Stand down. You're in our airspace. Surrender now or be killed. And then one of the guys is like, we've got it confirmed. He's received our message. And it's like, all right, now we wait. And the general's just standing there waiting. And then all of a sudden he gets teleported out and teleported onto Warworld. And he's met by a robot who's like, hey, General, welcome to World. Our commander's going to join you, but for now, just enjoy the games. And he's brought up into the stands watching this gladiatorial match. And the computer explains, like, yes, our lordship really enjoys his combat. And now he will render his judgment. And everyone looks up to where the general is. And he's like, what, they want me to decide? And he's like, no, not you, the guy behind you. And he turns around and sees Mongul standing over him with the big old thumbs down. And he's like, survival through strength. Survival of the fittest. Let that be known. And he's like, yes, this is Lord Mongul. He's super cool, awesome tyrant dictator man. And so Mongul steps down off his throne and he's like, hey, General, hope you enjoyed the games. Why don't you come walk with me? Because if I'm understanding this correctly, you just demanded I surrender to you? And General's like, that seems a bit far-fetched. I can't imagine I said that. So Mongul's like, well, all right. Here's the thing. Before you demanded my surrender, did you happen to look into the weapons and capability of my planet? No? Well, how about I just give you a quick walkthrough anyway? And we see him leading him through the war world, showing him these gigantic mechs and robots that can just utterly decimate everything. He's like, yeah, no, I've done a lot to secure my reign. Let me walk you through my childhood. And apparently he is the firstborn of a long line of rulers, benevolent rulers, mind you, who one day while his younger brother was being about to be born, he sees two rats fighting with each other and fighting to the death. And one of the rats rips out the other one's throat. And he's like, that day I understood everything. Survival of the fittest. Only the strong should survive and they should rule over the weak because... Yep, that sounds right to me. So he made his way into the building where his younger brother was gestating because they don't get pregnant normally. It's on a big circular bulb thing. And he breaks open the bulb, thus causing his younger brother to die. And apparently the parents tried to get a handle on Mongul. They're like, look, we're going to try different schools, different things, punishments, non-punishments, like all this stuff. But eventually they sent him to military school. That just taught him how to be a good military leader. That was a bad move. And eventually they realized there is no managing him. So the tiny little spat they had as a family ended up becoming an all-out war as Mongul took over parts of his father's military and raised up people and such until finally an all-out war broke out, which ended with Mongul taking the throne by force and becoming a fascist dictator. But he's like, yeah, enough about that. Let's talk about my garden, because I make little flowers you may know as black mercies. And he explains that the black mercy, you stick it to a person, it grabs onto them, and then all of their wildest dreams come true in their head, leaving them docile. But I thought, that's stupid. So I made a second breed that makes their greatest nightmares come true. And then they just scream a lot. So I've used both of them to different measures. I don't know which one's my favorite. And also, let's talk about the biggest thing here. The thing that you really should have investigated when it came down to my weapon capabilities is the entirety of Warworld. See, even right now, I'm sending out ultrasonic frequencies that you can't detect that are going to overheat your ship's engines and going to cause all of them to explode. And we see them all exploding around Warworld. He's like, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this laser beam that I've got on Warworld, I'm going to zap your moon in half, and it's going to come crumbling down onto your planet in a cataclysmic event that you could not possibly fathom. So yeah. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the planet. I'm going to send my robots. They're going to capture your people and either A, make them soldiers, B, put them in my gladiatorial pits, C, make them my janitors, or D, use them for medical parts, because I'm not going to let any of that go to waste. And then I'm going to send my robots down once all of your people are gone, and I'm going to mine your planet into nothingness in order to fuel my war world. And only then will I leave your planet. That's what I'm gonna do. So let me ask you, why in the hell did you think you could demand my surrender? And he's like, all right. While you're thinking about that, let me show you my favorite room, though. My all-time favorite room. And he walks him down the hall, and he opens up a door, and he's like, this room is all the people who demanded my surrender. And we see a room that is just filled like a mile long with pikes and the heads of alien species all on them. And he's like, I think you're going to like this room. And the guy starts to run. Mongul just picks him up, tears off his head, puts it on a pike and says, welcome to the ranks. And so he starts leaving the room. He talks to his computer saying, computer, go ahead and start all that stuff I said I was going to do. And also I've got a bit of blood on my armor, so clean that off. And computer's like, hey, yeah, no, cool. We're nearly done mining the planet because we're that efficient. It does take some more time. It says later. But he's like, so what do you want to do next, Mongul? And Mongul's like, I don't know. I'm kind of getting bored. All this is too easy. I need a good leader is only as good as his challenger, And computer's like, well, if that's the case, I got a planet for you. We're entering the space sector where the Green Lantern Corps is currently housed. And Mongul's like, ooh, they're interesting. All right, let's deal. So that's why Mongul is a Green Lantern comic and not a I don't even know what else it would be under. Probably Action Comics. I consider Mongul to be closer to Superman than Green Lantern, but regardless, I guess he's dealing with that. So, yeah. I like most of this issue. I think the art looks pretty good all throughout. I do think it is a good story reason for him to just be expository, because he knows he's going to kill this guy. So he's just walking him through all the motions and saying like, hey, here's all this stuff that I'm going to do to your family and your people and then you. And I want you to know it before I kill you. I like that from a expository standpoint. The only thing that I didn't like outright is the just full stop where he's like, by the way, Black Mercies. Because that, ever since that one book written by, I think it was Alan Moore, that's the only thing you know Mongul for. I put the flower on Superman, and it made him think he was in a dream world. And it's like, it didn't seem like that big of a deal. Like, that didn't seem like Mongul's thing, when it first happened. But now it's just developed into, no, that's Warworld and the Black Mercies. That's it. That's all Mongul is. And I'm okay with Warworld because that is intrinsically linked to him. But the Black Mercy always only seemed like that one story and then we're done. To then make it this whole thing where it's like, no, that's the only thing I grow in my garden. I don't know. That just seems a bit weird to me. So, yeah. That's my only real complaint is the Black Mercy thing. The rest of it's fine. It's not standout amazing great, but it's fine. Overall, I think I'm going to go ahead and say it's a 7.5. It would have been like an 8 if it either handled the Black Mercy thing with a bit more finesse or if it just made it not there at all. But a 7.5 is where it comes down to. So we'll see at what point Green Lanterns actually deal with Mongul, but clearly he is at least on the way. So, yeah. Aquaman number 23.1, aka Black Manta, written by Geoff Johns and Tony Bedard, art by Claude St. Aubin. So, we already saw Black Manta in the Forever Evil #1 book, and this is basically just a direct recap of that to begin with. We are at Belle Reve Penitentiary, and Amanda Waller's saying, Black Manta, we know you're not a psychopath, because you're not that crazy, but you are very, very merciless and very, very determined, specifically at Aquaman. So, would you like to join Task Force X? And he's like, no, I just want the death of Aquaman. And we get the backstory of Aquaman. Okay, so Aquaman's dad was protecting Aquaman from getting attacked by Black Manta because he was trying to get a piece of his blood. He was hired for it. He had nothing against Aquaman. We didn't even know he was Atlantean. But Black Manta was hired to get some of Arthur Curry's blood, and his dad stopped him in the way. And in the process, died of a heart attack. In revenge, Aquaman went onto his boat to attack him, but ended up killing Black Manta's dad instead. So it just led off this thing of they, are fighting against each other forever. And Amanda Waller points out, okay, I get it. Revenge, cool. But here's the thing. One day, Aquaman will die. And it's entirely possible that will be before you're dead. So what are you going to do after he's dead? And before he can answer, we see Deathstorm and Power Ring blowing up Belle Reve. And Amanda Waller's like, Jesus, this is the second building I've been in the past, 3 days that has blown up. Everyone, keep the doors closed. Don't let anyone out. And we see guards at Black Manta's door immediately get ripped to shreds by, I'm just going to say it, the most horrifying looking king shark I've ever seen in my life. Not because he's supposed to look horrifying, but because his eyes are now on stalks. And I hate looking at it. Anyway, he hands over a coin from the Secret Society to Black Manta, and it's just here you go, you definitely deserve in. So we see everybody in Belle Reve breaking out. Black Manta just slowly walks down the hall, not being interfered with at all. A guard nearly tries to stop him, but then Black Manta slits his throat with the coin. Then we get my favorite page in this whole book of him making his way to the personal FX room where all of his gear is stored. While he's in there, Ocean Master is also in there, just getting his stuff out. They just share a look for a second, and then Ocean Master grabs his stuff and leaves. And neither of them do anything to the either one. And I just love it. I don't know why. It's just such a perfect little moment of them saying no, my gripe's not with Atlanteans. My gripe's not even with this guy. It's just Aquaman. So we see Black Manta escapes. There's a helicopter flying around that he manages to hijack. And he makes his way to Happy Harbor where all the villains are being talked to by the crime syndicate. And we see, tensions are running high until Aquaman's trident hits the ground and everyone sees it, and Black Manta just runs over, picks it up, and says, it's mine. This is mine now. I've got it. And the crime syndicate, they step up and they say, Justice League is dead. We killed them all. Especially Aquaman. That's the thing that happened. And Black Manta looks around and he's like, oh, Aquaman's dead. And he just walks away out of the crowd. He's just gone. We see the rest of the stuff happening, he just leaves. And he throws the coin into the ocean, and he makes his way up to Massachusetts, where he's at his father's grave, and he kneels down before his dad's grave, and he's like, Dad, it's over. Aquaman's dead. This is great. This is perfect. It feels awesome. And then we see Ultraman flying up and moving the moon in front of the sun, which we also saw in Forever Evil #1. And as this happens, of course, it horrifically messes with the tides. So this giant tidal wave comes in and just overtakes this graveyard next to where he's buried. And we see this, the wave overtakes the graveyard as Black Manta uses the trident to like hold onto the ground, but his father's grave is literally being torn to shreds in front of his eyes, to the point where the coffin is unburied, the skeleton comes out and just runs away with the rest of the tide. Like, it's gone and there's nothing he could do to stop it. And Ultraman looks down and he's like, oh right, tides, that's a thing. Oh well, too late now. And he flies away. And we see Black Manta remembering the words of Amanda Waller saying, hey, once he's dead, what are you going to shift your anger to after that? And we see him put back on the helmet, pick up Aquaman's trident, and it says, Black Manta's war against the crime syndicate unfolds in Forever Evil. I'm pumped. I think this was a fantastic issue. I think it does a lot for Black Manta as a character because, again, it says this whole thing of what are you going to do when Aquaman's gone? And it does further the idea of, yes, he wants revenge for his father, but it's not just his father's killer. It's the people who, like, dishonor his father in any way. And we see that because of Ultraman's actions here, he unwittingly did so. So now the whole crime syndicate is on his hit list. I think it's very well done. He's also very menacing. Like I said, I love that page with Ocean Master, where it's just that shared look they have before going their separate ways. I think this is a great issue. I'm going to go ahead and say, I almost want to say 9, but it's just, I don't know. I feel like 9 should not be here. It's missing that little extra something. So I'm going to say a very, 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 very high 8.5, but I am withholding 9. Just, it's missing that little bit of extra je ne sais quoi. So yeah. But it's good. It's very good. If I could suggest so far, out of all the Forever Evil tie-ins I've read so far, this is the best one. Earth 2, number 15.2, aka Solomon Grundy, written by Matt Kindt, art by Aaron Lopresti. So, if you remember in Earth 2, it was actually pretty much the first villain that book dealt with. And this says that it is now on Earth 2, so I'm assuming that means, in between issue 15 and 16. I can't figure this one out. This one's a bit confusing to me. So we are somewhere in a desert, and we see a shooting star come down, and a boy's looking up at it like, oh, wow, that's the brightest shooting star I've ever seen. And there's this couple on top of the hood, and they're like, oh, honey, make a wish. And then they realize the shooting star is headed directly for them. So it collides, explodes the car, and out of the crater comes Solomon Grundy. And much like before, he needs to drain life, so he walks up to a nearby cactus, just dissolves to dust in his hand, and he's still an emissary of the rot, the avatar of the rot. It's hard to say. So then we go to Then, which is 1898 in Slaughter Swamp. We see a man singing the Solomon Grundy nursery rhyme to his child as he walks out and sees his wife trying to grow some crops, but apparently nothing's growing here. It's a swamp. It's very hard to do that. And she goes on saying, oh, their boss is taking all this money from them. They barely have enough to save. Well, how are we supposed to feed our child? And we see that she calls this guy Sol, implying that he is Solomon Grundy. So real time, we see him approach a convenience store that's out in this desert. And as he steps in, he just reaches up, grabs the two people of the place, and drains all the life from him. Back in the past, we see they work in a slaughterhouse, both the wife and the husband, and we hear the wife screaming behind the boss's door. She runs out, fixing her clothes, and Solomon sees this, and the boss has also got his suspenders down around his waist, and he's like, oh, what are you looking at? Get back to work if you know what's good for you. So back in the desert, as he exits the convenience store, we see some flies buzzing around him. They also drop dead and turn to dust as he makes his way towards a city over the horizon. So then we see his wife, whose name is Penny, by the way. Penny, she says, I'm sorry, Solomon. She takes a knife that was used for slaughtering pigs. She stabs herself in the throat, and she falls down this chute that leads into the bayou. before Solomon can even say anything, the boss is like, hey, Solomon, go get that bitch wife of yours and get her out of the swamp before the gators get her. And Solomon's like, okay, yeah, I'll go do that. So he goes around, he picks up his wife's body and drags it out of the corpse. This whole time he's kind of reciting to him the Solomon Grundy theme, saying, born on a Monday, christened on a Tuesday, blah, blah, blah. And at this point, he walks back into the slaughterhouse, knife in hand, slams the door behind him, goes up to the boss, and the boss is just like, oh, what is that you're reciting to yourself? What are you, dumb? And then he just takes a knife, starts killing his boss. And then he proceeds to go through and kills every single other person that he was working with in the slaughterhouse before returning to the same slide that his wife died on, stabbing himself in the stomach and falling into the bayou. But as he falls bleeding into the bayou, across the way, farther than I think he can hear, his son from the beginning starts crying, and that is enough for his eyes to shoot open, seemingly being brought into existence by the rot. So back in real time, we see he's on the road. A car comes out of nowhere and nearly hits him. He just tanks it because, of course, he does. And as he makes his way into town, he starts tearing everything apart, saying, "Where's the green man? Let him see I'm back." So the army comes in, starts trying to fight him. He just immediately takes them all apart. One of them fires a rocket launcher towards him, and it seems to work. He seems to explode into a million pieces. His blood, however, gets everywhere, and on all the people it lands on, they start disintegrating as well. And so he's more or less dead. But then we see out in the desert, from a decaying husk of a cow skeleton, he reforms, and he says, buried on a Sunday, born again on Monday, as he is able to continue because Solomon Grundy is effectively immortal. So, yeah, there's a lot to it. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure how this takes place. That's primarily because last I remember in Earth 2, he was removed from the rot. I don't think he was their emissary anymore. They basically he was left on the moon. Okay, I guess that makes sense with the shooting star. I guess he just jumped off the moon is the implication here. And he landed back on Earth. All right, I'm okay with that, I guess. But still, I don't think he really should be able to respawn himself this much if the rot doesn't want him, Regardless, it is a good, well-written issue. I do think that the boss is written a bit, comically evil. He's so evil that when the woman dies, he's just like, screw her. Go get her body out of the swamp. We don't want to deal with gators. And of course he's trying to force himself sexually on her before that. All of this is just screaming, yeah, no, we get it. He's a tragic villain, but he could have just killed the boss. He didn't have to kill all of his coworkers as well. And then we know he tried to destroy all life on planet Earth. So I don't think tragic villain really works for him, but do what you got to do, I guess. Beyond that, I think I'll give this one I'm going to give it a 6.5. It's not that it's bad. It's got its own little poetry to it, but it's just, I don't know, it's missing something. It doesn't feel like it's really got a good overarching story to tell. It's more so just a brief little here's his origin, here's the thing he's doing, so that it's not just completely his origin. Okay, bye. So yeah, it's a 6.5. The Flash 23.2, aka Reverse Flash, written by Brian Buccellato and Francis Manapul, art by Scott Hepburn. So the entire arc that we've been dealing with in The Flash proper has all led up to Reverse Flash and Flash fighting, and then it said tune in for this issue. So we open up with Daniel West, and he's like, yeah, I went to go visit my dad. He's in a nursing home, and I wanted to go in and show him, we had a pretty screwed up household. He was abusive. I was a punk. Our sister's the only one who was any good. But I wanted to go show him that, I've made something of myself. So he walks into the nursing home room, and his father throws coffee in his face, which then he immediately uses his powers as Reverse Flash to reverse time and then attack his father. And he's like, I'm going to kill you, Dad. I am straight going to murder you because you are a bad person. You're a real monster, not like me. But I also, look what you've made me. This is your fault. And as he is attacking his dad, he's like, I am going to kill you, but I'm not going to kill you here. I'm going to go back in time far enough to stop you from ever being a monster to our family at all. So at this point, we get his full backstory. He was in jail for some, minor crimes, whatever. We will actually see that in a few panels, but he gets out and nobody's waiting for him except for an attack by Gorilla City, which happened in The Flash. And he is saved and brought to the mirror world by the Rogues, but it turns out it was actually just a shakedown. Like, yeah, they saved everyone, but they required all their wallets and stuff to get back home. So Daniel didn't want to do this. He punches Heatwave in the face, goes and steals a car that's here in the mirror world, and as the Rogues are trying to stop him, they accidentally direct the car to collide with a Speed Force battery that is on a monorail that is also in the mirror world, which it breaks at the exact moment that he has Mirror Master basically sending him back to the real world anyway. So because of all those things happening, he is imbued with this Speed Force energy, and he's able to see past, present, future all at once. And all of a sudden, he is brought out into the desert, seemingly dead. He is like infused with shrapnel from the monorail. His flesh is burning. He's just not doing good at all. And then as his blood is dripping out of his face, all of a sudden it starts reversing. And he accidentally taps into his powers. He taps into the Speed Force. And in doing so, he's able to see everybody else who's also attached to the Speed Force, because at that time there were like 4 other people besides Barry. And he's like, oh, okay, hold on, I'm piecing this together. All of them are splitting the energy of the Speed Force. So if I just kill them, I can then use more power, and I will be able to travel even further back in time, because he's limited to how far back he can travel by how many people are left alive. So then we flash back further, and we see him saying like, hey, this was like, I went up, I told my sister, she was at college at the time, hey, you don't have to worry about me. I finally got a gig that's going to pay for everything. And Iris is like, Dan, just get a job, man. Like, stop trying to do like crimes and stuff to get paid. Like, I'm going out and I'm doing my things, and you just need to do that too. Also, go apologize to Dad. Go talk to him. And he's like, I'm not apologizing. He's a horrible person. Why would I apologize to him? And it's like, well, because he's not going to apologize to you unless you apologize to him. Someone has to be the bigger man. And it's like, well, it's not me. So at that point, he tells him, yeah, go out, get a real job, stop running these criminal things, and stop like coming to me. And let go of the past. And we see that, they did a robbery, and, they were more or less going to get away. But it turns out the day they did this robbery was actually the very first day that Barry became the Flash and was like running around town and was being a hero. So he managed to put Daniel away because he just barely squeaked over the age of 18, and he was away for like 5 years. So he doesn't like the Flash to begin with. Then we go back even further, and we see him in a suburb, and he regularly spent time outside of his house. He didn't like spending time near his dad. He went to a little creek behind his house to collect crickets, which he said helped him sleep. And one day, as the crickets are chirping, his dad just comes into his room and just pours coffee all inside the cage, killing all the crickets. And he's like, your mother hated crickets. So he walks out the room. Daniel gets up, like starts hitting him, trying to punch him or whatnot. Father just pushes him down. And as the father's walking down the stairs, Daniel pushes him down the stairs, severely, breaking his spine and making it so he will never walk again. And Daniel, in that moment, unable to live with what he did, he just runs out of the house. Age like, I think he said he was like 14, not even. He's super young, and he just leaves, and he never comes back. So then we flash back a little bit further in the woods outside the West home. This was when he was 8 years old. Iris comes out to go get him because him and his dad had a fight. And we see that Iris actually has a bruise on her cheek because his dad was drinking and punched her. And he's like, oh, he did this because of me. He did this to you because he hates me. And it's like, no, he doesn't hate you. Turns out their mom died during childbirth, specifically Daniel's childbirth. And the father does probably blame him to some extent. But he's also just an angry drunk. So at this point, Iris gives him a hug and, says, oh, I love you. You got to stop running away. We've got to be there for each other. And as they're walking back home, they hear all the crickets chirping, and Iris says, Daniel says, yeah, my teacher says that the crickets chirping is the boy crickets saying that I love you to the girl crickets. I'm going to catch a whole bunch of crickets so that anytime you hear them chirp, you know that I love you, Iris. And she's like, oh, that's sweet. And as they make their way back into the house, they're hoping that their dad's in a better mood, not nearly as drunk. And she says, "Don't worry, I promise I will protect you." And we see that as they enter the house, Reverse Flash is there with his hand around their dad's throat. And he's like, "Oh, whoops, this wasn't my plan." And we see Flash is also like drained of energy down on the ground, which is exactly where we left off in Flash 23. So it turns out that he used all this Speed Force energy to go back and kill his dad before his dad was like horribly, horribly abusive. Still very bad, but still abusive. So yeah, I mean, it's a good origin. I don't think it's bad. I think that it's kind of a bit lame that his whole thing was, oh, I was exposed to Speed Force energy and it drove me crazy or whatever. Like, other people were also exposed to the Speed Force and they didn't have red skin. And, like, that's the excuse for him having black on him as well. This black, like, metal thing is the shrapnel from the monorail. I don't know. It seems like they conjured this origin to try to justify the design rather than the reverse, pardon the pun. That being said, I do like the motivation, but I also think that it's going to be hard to spin him into a larger villain with that motivation. Like, he's here. He has the opportunity to do it. If he succeeds, then we're done, which I don't think he will. But if he fails, then why would he have reason to do, like, anything else? You know? Like, I don't know. It's hard to imagine this into a just general hatred of the Flash, which I think Reverse Flash needs to have, you know? That being said, I think it's an okay issue. I don't think it's awful by any means. I think the Crickets thing is a little bit weird, unless it's going to come back up in some major way. But it's not, by no means is it a bad villain's origin story. I would say this is probably just a flat 7. It's good. It's fine. It's not blowing me away. It's not awful by any means. It's just a standard comic that has done its duty well. So 7 sounds right to me. Justice League 23.2, aka Lobo, written by Marguerite Bennett, art by Ben Oliver. I thought I had more time before I had to deal with this character. I thought I wasn't going to have to deal with him for months, but we're here now, so I'm just not going to give you any more context, and I'm going to read to you directly what the first 2 caption boxes are on this page. They are... You think you know me, screw you. That's it. So, we're introduced to new Lobo, new 52 Lobo, and he is a more sleek, stylish looking design. He's currently sharing a drink with a bunch of random people at this bar. He's a person. He's doing things. Regardless, he's at this bar and he's waiting for this singer to come on. And when the singer's finally announced, he's like, freaking finally. And he jumps over the crowd and he's like, hey, everybody. Turns out this guy's got 50,000 creds on his head as like a bounty for murder and extortion. So I'll be taking him, thank you. And he chops off the guy's head. And another thing that he keeps saying, he has like 7 catchphrases that he keeps bringing up. This one is, you don't know me, you don't know anything. And then immediately followed by, sorry, not sorry. That's his big one, is sorry, not sorry. So we see 12 hours later, he's delivering this thing, the guy that he meant to kill, or meant to bring into this bar. And he goes up to the person, it's just like, oh, hey, yeah, no, thanks for that. And Lobo's like, oh, if you don't need the head, I'd love to use it as a hood ornament. And it's like, yeah, totally. Anyway, Lobo, main man, have I got a mission for you? And basically says, we just want you to deliver some cargo. That's all you got to do. No hunting down anybody. But if you do, we finally have the information you've been looking for. And Lobo's like, give it to me. I need that info. And the guy says, cargo first, then we'll give it to you. So Lobo says, yeah, done. Hops on the cargo ship, starts sending it through space. Apparently this is the bad side of space where a bunch of people go and attack them. And he's like, yeah, this is an easy trick. No problem. So he gets attacked by some random ship. It starts knocking him out of the air and apparently knocks off his hood ornament, which he's super pissed about. So The ship ends up getting hit. It collides down onto this planet. He looks to see who is it that's attacking him, and he's like, oh, these guys are stupid. They couldn't possibly stand in a fight against me, and I don't think they knew it was me to begin with. So they jump out, they start attacking Lobo, and he just immediately slices all of them up. And he's like, yeah. When I was doing that earlier job, when I had all that suave, debonair stuff, that was me being a professional. But this is who I am in actuality. And he keeps on slicing through them, just crazy bad. He does get hit a few times, but he explains he's a Zarnian. He's able to heal very quickly. And as he sees that his ship cracked, he's like, all right, well, whatever they were after for in my cargo bay, I want to see what it is. So he cracks open the cargo bay and he sees it's actually full of people. And these aliens, they stumble out and they're like, oh, thank God you let us free. They were going to sell us because our bones are worth so much money. They're super rare minerals in them, but you've set us free. Thank you so much. And he's like, yeah, not a problem. Here, let me help you up. And Lobo helps him to his feet and he's like, cool. Get back in the ship. He's like, what? Get back in the ship. And so he forces them all back in there and says, like, yeah, well, that's the job. I don't know what you want me to say about it. Sorry, not sorry. So we see him reaching the trade junction. He sends off all the people, and he's like, oh, they're screaming out for God to save them and stuff like that. And Lobo's like, ugh, I hate this part. Paperwork. So he ends up filling out the paperwork. He gets paid with the information that the woman had. And turns out that he is claiming that he's the one who killed all of the Zarnians. He murdered the whole planet, but one Zarnian managed to escape and has since been outrunning him. And that Zarnian is also seemingly using Lobo's name and his reputation to, like, gain favor. So it turns out that the retcon is the Lobo that we're familiar with is not Lobo, it's some other guy. And this is the real Lobo, who's now got his location saying that he is on Earth and he is going out to get him. So, once again, he says all of his things. You think you know me, you don't know me, you haven't even met me. Sorry, not sorry. Okay. I want to keep this brief because there's an entire Lobo series that we will eventually get to on this show, and I will have many things to say at that point, I'm sure. But from what I know of New Lobo, the thing is that old Lobo was meant to parody the 90s and all the tropes that were big in the 90s of, like, super violent, super brutal, all that sort of stuff. This guy, New Lobo, seems like he's supposed to be a parody of, like, modern age comics of the 2010s and onwards. But the issue being is that we hadn't, like, they aren't as defined, if that makes any sense. We don't have clear things we can point to and say, oh, that's so 2010s in comics. Like, they're a lot more nebulous than that. So when you make this character that's supposed to be a parody of that, he just comes off as a member of the group, you know? It's not as blatant or overt as Lobo was. Add on top of that these catchphrases. Oh my God. It's a short comic. Like, it's very, very cut and dry. I was almost done halfway through. Like, the sorry, not sorry, oh, I want to punch him. But that's kind of the point, I think. So do I think it is a poorly written comic? No. Do I like the idea of there being another Lobo? Yeah, kinda. It's not an awful idea, but I just think execution here, like saying that this guy we've been attached to all this time is just a fake, has that ever worked in any fiction, in any medium at all? Has it ever worked to say, actually, the guy you think you know is not the one you know because I'm the real one of him and I will replace him? I can't think of a time, but please let me know. Overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 6, but that's mainly because I really like the art style, and I think the concept had some, like, possibility to it, but it is definitely not thought out well enough, especially with how it would backlash with fans of Lobo that we've come to know. So, yeah, 6. Justice League of America, number 7.2, aka Killer Frost, written by Sterling Gates, art by Derlis Santa Cruz. So, We open up with a woman who has frozen solid in an Antarctic snow, and we get a narration saying, yeah, here are the stages of hypothermia. If your body goes through all this stuff, like, you're super dead, and there's no way you can possibly survive. And as the voice is describing it, it says, like, yeah, most people, they hear about this, and they're terrified. I hear about this, and I'm fascinated. And we're introduced to Dr. Caitlin Snow, who has just arrived at this Antarctic base, who meets up with a Dr. Nolan, who is second in command. Snow is actually taking the lead because the woman that we saw in the beginning, who is, I believe her last name is Lincoln. I could be wrong there. She was the previous head of command, and she just apparently wandered out into the snow one night and died out there. So Snow is filling in for the intermediate. She's just kind of a temporary replacement. So apparently she's super smart and she's come highly recommended. She makes her way into the building and is introduced to the group. None of them matter for the point of the story, but regardless, she's like, oh yeah, sure. Hey, do you mind if I go see what Dr. Lincoln was working on? And they're like, yeah, sure, of course. Go ahead, Nolan, let her go see it. And then we see they all look at each other like, she's no good. So they make their way into the chamber and Dr. Nolan explains, okay, here's what she was working on. It's essentially a perpetual motion machine that we can get infinite energy from. And everyone thinks she's crazy, but like, you know, we're really super proud of it. We definitely think she can do it. And so Dr. Snow looks at it, and basically their job here as interim is just to keep the lights on until like a more permanent member can be found to run this. But Caitlin is so enamored by the idea of this project. She's like, I mean, I gotta give it a shot, right? I have to try to see if I can get it to work. So we see she's trying to fix up things. She's working on papers and stuff like that. All the other members of the group are coming in being like, hey, Caitlin, what you doing? She's like, oh, you know, just trying out some different things, reading the papers, you know, having a good time. So at that point, we see that she's saying, no, she was like super duper close. Like she was maybe just weeks away, if even. Like I've managed to make the small changes that she proposed, and I'm test running it now. And she flips it on, and then boom, it works. And she's like, oh, I am the doctor of the millennium. Oh yeah, let me hear it. And as she is happy about her thing, she is attacked from behind by one of the other doctors there. And as she comes to, she's now inside of the room that this machine is kept in. And they're like, hey, hi, Caitlin. We killed Dr. Lincoln, if that wasn't obvious, because she got too close to this, and we work for Hive. And for some reason, Hive really, really doesn't want this thing to exist. So we're just going to say that there was an accident while you were working on it, and it killed you. Okay, cool. Bye now. And then they flip the switch and she starts freaking out like, oh no, I have to stop it. And she starts pulling out like different cords and such. And she accidentally pulls out the cooling system. And at that moment, she gets hit with a bolt of this energy and the machine automatically shuts down. And as they look inside the room, they see this giant ice egg in there. And they're like, what the hell? What is it? And as one of them goes to touch it, arms come out, reach for the doctor, and we see that the life is drained from him as Caitlin stands in front of them saying like, oh, I'm so hungry. I need to feed. And we see her start to chase down the other scientists. She's able to use her ice powers to trap them. And all she can think of is warmth and feeding. That's it. So she ends up making her way through all the scientists until finally ending up at Dr. Nolan. And she's just like, oh yeah, what was it you said while I was in there? This will all be over in a snap. And then she kisses him. And as she kisses him, all the life is drained out of him. And she's like, yeah, hypothermia usually takes like hours to take effect. With a kiss, I can do it in seconds. So that's cool. So she stumbles out of the building, makes her way to a nearby Norwegian camp where she, I guess, fakes being nice enough, long enough to get to her home in Pittsburgh. And then when there, she came across Firestorm because she was doing supervillainy things. And as she's fighting against Firestorm, she gets zapped by one of his energy beams, and it temporarily cures her. She turns back into normal Caitlin Snow. And she's like, oh my god, I'm not hungry. I'm normal. I can live a normal life. But then very quickly, the snow sets back in again. She's like, oh, okay, that sucks. But now I know what I have to do is attack Firestorm, steal his energy, and use it on myself. I couldn't possibly just ask him to work with me. That'd be too easy. So She apparently had a long-standing rivalry with Firestorm that in his book we just never got to see until finally we get to modern day and she hears from the secret society like, oh yeah, the Justice League is dead. We killed them, and that includes Firestorm. And she's like, oh my god, I can't believe it. And so she's walking away from the group as the crime syndicate announces all this. She walks into town, just starts destroying random things in the city, and her like group of compadres, Multiplex and Typhoon, they're just like, yeah, she's a bit angry right now because her boyfriend died, and she's like, it's not my boyfriend, but like, what am I supposed to do now? Because she's super upset because she has no other ways to change back into Caitlin Snow. So her last thing is, what the hell am I going to do now? I just don't want to die in here from the cold. And she's sitting alone in an alley with just like, you know, that scene from Frozen with all the ice just spread on the doorway, that one. I think it's okay. I think that it's... Killer Frost, the only other time that we've seen her in the New 52 was just an out-and-out villain. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So giving her this tragic backstory makes me feel like they kind of want to backpedal that a little bit. They're like, well, now, hold on. She's just doing this because she needs to, not because she wants to. But then I point out she could have just asked for help. That seems reasonable. So, yeah, I think that there is good here. I think that it is decently written. I don't have a problem with the character, but I do think that it is very heavily a retcon to the character. And if they want to move forward in saying that, like, okay, no, she was actually like a misunderstood villain all along, so be it. But I don't think that they've done enough to turn her into like anti-hero yet. I think that that would require a little bit more going for it. So we'll see how they move forward with her. This doesn't say continued in anything yet, so I don't know where she's going to be, but maybe Justice League of America. Who knows? Overall, I'm going to give this one a... I'll give it a 7. I'll just give it a flat 7. It's fine. It's good. It is an okay comic. It's just not blowing me away or anything like that. It's a perfectly competently made continuation of what they would want to do with Killer Frost. Teen Titans number 23.1, aka Trigon, written by Marv Wolfman, art by Cafu. So, this one's a bit of a doozy. So, we pick up on this alien planet, which may be in a different universe, I don't know, and everything's all happy, hunky-dory, and then all of a sudden, they start beating the ever-loving crap out of each other, and we see some other, more angelic-looking aliens, more like pristine, are saying to each other, like, wait a minute, hold on, we got rid of evil on that planet, like thousands of years ago. What's it doing back again? Maybe we messed up. Maybe it was something else. I don't know. Regardless, we need to wipe the slate clean, and then we can go ahead and check on that. And as they're doing a scan, they come across this being with 6 eyes, and they're like, wait, hold on, I don't recognize. That's unfamiliar. Maybe that's why we messed up on this planet. Teleport that thing to us. Let's see what's up with him. And so they teleport the thing, who has 2 little like orc-looking cronies with him. And they're like, hey, we are the eminence of all good things, and we want you to join us in being all good and whatnot. And they scream at him. They're just like, screw you. And it's like, well, all right, that's uncalled for. But regardless, we are going to go ahead and purge you of your evil ways. And so they summon this thing called the Heart of Darkness, which is this massive, like, planet-sized entity that comes down and uses its tendrils to wrap up these 3 beings. And they say, yes, a dark soul will give it strength, but it's always hungry for more, and that's how we purge evilness from the world, is via the Heart of Darkness. So it wraps these guys up and starts attacking them. And the 2 orc-like things both die. But the middle one, the main one, the leader, he survives. And they're like, what? Hold on. Nobody's ever survived this. What's going on here? And he's like, yes, at last. I am complete. And they're like, what are you talking about? And he says, this was my plan all along, you idiots. You don't recognize me. You don't recognize my species or whatever. And he says that he was born in celestial blasphemy, and he has now merged in with the evil of many universes, and now he's draining it all out so that he is able to now become, he says, I am now power, I am now death, I am now Trigon. One of these things is not like the other, but regardless, he says, look into your souls and see my unholy spawning. And so they all get shredded into dust, and Trigon stands and absorbs the entirety of the Heart of Darkness. And he's like, cool, awesome. Now I'm going to search throughout the remaining universes for more evil that I can suck on. And he's blasted back by some divine energy, and he's like, okay, well, if I can't go to those universes, I'll bring the universes to me. And so he summons a woman and says, hey, you gonna have my baby, and that baby's gonna grow up to be me. Got it? And she's like, okay. So she is impregnated with Trigon by Trigon. She goes back to her universe, gives birth. Trigon then proceeds to destroy the universe. And he does this numerous times. So as he is killing everything, every galaxy and universe, he's like, all right, I'm trying to create progeny. This is a recurring theme, mind you, that he just wants to get laid. He's trying to create more of people for himself, but all of the species that he impregnates all end up either dying in the conception or killing themselves because they don't want to have Trigon's kids, both of which are understandable. But regardless, he does end up having 3 sons, and all of them are weak and useless, which I do believe are the 3 sons that we're familiar with, until finally he gets to this one planet and he starts attacking them. And then all of a sudden this knight in silent armor, which is of course an ancestor to whoever Wonder Girl was, her armor or whatnot, and we see her attack Trigon and is actually holding her own, and Trigon tries to destroy her, absolutely can't, and she tries to destroy Trigon, and he's actually doing some damage, but is not nearly enough to kill him. And she's just like, oh yes, my armor cannot be destroyed. I was training for this very moment. Your terror ends here, monster. And he's like, what if I just leave? And so he does. He just bails. And he's like, I'm going to make a new army with blackjacks and hookers. And so he flies away. And he continues to look for someone that can actually, like, give him a worthy successor. And finally, we see he manages to be brought a woman from Earth. And she's like, woman of Earth, do you fear me or worship me? And she's like, both. You are to be feared and worshipped. And he's like, oh, that's a good answer. All right, you're with me. And so he's like, all right, let's go to the bedroom. You're going to give me a child. And then the narration picks up saying, and so was born the only female of Trigon known to survive. And we get a whole page spread of this woman basically talking to the camera saying, that was Raven. Raven is the daughter. I am her mother. And I need you, dear reader, dear person on the other side of this camera, to join me. I need to kill the father of my daughter. Will you help me? And it says, look for the Teen Titans Forever Evil issue number 2. And then it says the Trial of Kid Flash in number 24, which neither of those things sound like it's going to fix up this plot. So I got to be honest with you, I kind of hated reading this issue. I don't think it was like the worst thing I've read out of Teen Titans, not by far. If anything, it actually answers a good amount of questions in regards to Trigon's origins and the Silent Armor's origins. But the fact that, like, an uncomfortably large amount of the comic is him just saying how much he wants to breed, like, I on one hand, I get it, because it's meant to make me feel uncomfortable. Like, that's part of what Trigon is. It's just not okay. On the other hand, there's ways to do that without making me feel uncomfortable as, like, you as a writer, you know? Like, I feel like it was written in a very almost sleazy way. Just to give you a point of reference, he breeds with women from all different species, and yet all of them have boobs. Like, it feels very weird that these distinct alien species are all very, very feminine in the way they're being represented as essentially forced into this. It's uncomfortable at the very least. So yeah, I don't know how to better explain it than that, besides saying that I think that it's, I gotta give it like a 4.5 in that it's, the first half of it's just kind of slow paced and boring. The middle bit picks up a little bit of saying, here's how we got to our universe. And then the last half is like, and then he went on a rager. That's, I don't know really what I was supposed to get out of this, but a 4.5 seems like the right rating. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this September 11th, 2013. Oh dear God, it's September 11th. Full disclosure, I am filming this like 2 days in advance, and I didn't even think to look at the date right up until I started filming this segment right now. That makes the Harley Quinn issue so much worse. So, what were they thinking? Oh my God. She committed an act of terrorism on September 11th. Dear Lord, editorial, get your crap together. Okay, enough on that. Next week. What are the comics we have coming out next week that is not on September 11th? So we have, in somewhat of a discernible order here, The Penguin, Ra's al Ghul, Clayface, Scarecrow, Lex Luthor, Hell, Black Hand, The Rogues, Dial E, Shadow Thief, Cheetah, Deathstroke, Eclipso, and Arcane. The only ones I think that are worth really mentioning out of that one is Ra's al Ghul, which is actually Ra's al Ghul in the League of Assassins, is the full title. Hell is, of course, awful. And Dial E, for anyone who wasn't following the series, Dial H is, I think, the villain from that. But to be fair, I haven't read it, so I'm not sure. And Shadow Thief showed up in Hawkman. I only mention that because I'm pretty sure like 2 of you are actually listening to me talk about Hawkman. So that's a thing. Speaking of which, if you want to see any of the comics be individualized and maybe just watch through a whole playlist of a single title, for those of you who didn't listen to the intro for whatever reason, those are going up on YouTube on the Comics from the Multiverse channel, where this video was hosted as well. You can go ahead to the channel itself and check those out. They will start uploading actually the same day that this is going live. So at this point, if you're watching this as this comes out, the only one that'll be up is Justice League #1. But I'm doing them all. All of them are getting caught up. It may take me until 2027. No, it's going to be longer than that. It may take me until I die, but I will cut up every single one of those and have them uploaded just for you. But anyway, yeah, that's gonna do it for me. If you have any comments on any of the comics that I listed off last week, this week, whatever, we got a Discord, we got a Reddit, we got a Patreon, but we also have those other two. So don't feel entitled to pay money. Like, no, down with the system, man. Fight the power. Anyway, that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening. However it is you consume this podcast, be sure to tune in next week. And always remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.